My name is Meamande Wamukwamba, and I am a Zambian lawyer working in Lusaka, Zambia with Chapter 1 Foundation Limited. We provide pro bono legal services to human rights organizations, human rights defenders, and Zambian citizens that suffer from human rights violations all across the country. Over the past 2-3 years, my focus has been on public interest litigation, and particularly litigation that involves the freedom of expression, the freedom of assembly, and basically all rights related to the civic space in Zambia. I got into human rights defending because I think the climate really required it. It's something that I had been passionate about for some time, even whilst I was a corporate lawyer. But I think once our civic space started rapidly shrinking, once Zambians were seriously getting arrested, there was a gap in our system, and there was need for lawyers particularly who could get into the judiciary and into the judicial system and provide representation for Zambians that were getting arrested for things they had said on Facebook, on social media, things they had said on radio. The civic space was rapidly shrinking, and because of the economic crisis that was happening in the country at the same time, a lot of people could not afford representation. So there was need for a group of lawyers to really just be able to look away from the commercial aspect of the law, which is the most common, to actually just really stand in the gap for the people of Zambia. I think the challenges were twofold. So I had personal challenges in terms of my physical security, where I lived, how I moved, how my social life was. I had to become extremely cautious and extremely private, and be aware of being followed, being tracked, my lines being tapped. I needed to be extremely sensitive of how I use my devices, how I use my phones. It really felt like at some point you really feel like your freedom is, you're not 100% free, So I think in my personal capacity, those are some of the challenges that I faced. And then you would find that family members also started experiencing certain challenges as a result of my work. There was grabbing of land of some of my family members. There was just a lot that was happening that really could not be explained by some of the state institutions, but was happening to my family members regardless. They could not get help from the police. They really could not get help from the judicial systems. They could not get help from regulatory institutions. It was kind of like having some names blacklisted, basically, and you facing some of these issues. And from a legal perspective, I think work became very, very difficult. Things as simple as getting a bail application granted were complicated, and even once granted, you would find something as simple as a court officer signing their name to a document would be very difficult, because nobody wanted to be affiliated with anything that seemed to be anti-government, because for some time the government was really biting down on anybody that said anything contrary to what they stood for or what their position was. So, it became very difficult, especially as a young lawyer, really swimming in these deep waters where you have a case, there's all this state, there's all this intelligence there, everything is getting frustrated, clients are getting moved in the middle of the night, you can't locate your client, You know, they're in one prison today, they're in the next prison tomorrow. I've had situations where my client would call me in the middle of the night when the police are moving him from one town to the next without informing his lawyers. They would try and question clients without their lawyers being present. They would restrict, they would literally fight lawyers from being present during questioning, trying to extract statements and confessions from clients. And, you know, as a woman, there would be a lot of cadres in these police stations and in the prisons. So it was very dangerous, and it would get uncomfortable sometimes. I think, it was tricky. But those are just some of the challenges I would face in terms of what positions I could give, what arguments I could give. It was very difficult to express certain opinions if they were not pro-government. And, you know, after some time you get a label of being anti-government, and, you know, it just affects work generally. Those were really the main challenges I would say I faced as a direct result of human rights defending. It's important to always stand for something and to always do the right thing, and to also not have an individualistic approach to life. We live in a society and we cannot be divorced from our country, and it is important for every single citizen of a particular country to actively participate in making sure that the right thing is maintained, even if sometimes it may not be the popular thing to do. And as a human rights defender that has been in the thick of what could have been basically the end of my career before it started, I would say take courage and just do the right thing, and everything else will come together to work with you. And ultimately there's always people that reflect the same beliefs as you do, and that are looking to you to take the lead and inspire you, and that are drawing inspiration from you. And I think that's what has been demonstrated with the Zambian election and how it went, because for a long time it felt like there was just a handful of us that were fighting some of the the gross human rights violations that were happening in the country. But then polling day then came and showed us that that fire had actually stayed burning, and it had made a difference in terms of how the electorate understood the law and understood exactly what was happening in the country. So I would encourage other human rights defenders to keep up the good fight, to keep pushing and take courage, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You just have to keep going and you have to keep believing. Human rights defending is not for the faint of heart. It takes courage, it takes conviction, it takes a lot to be able to say no to temporary self-gain for the good of the Republic and for long-term good, even personally. And I think it's something that us young people need to take responsibility of and take full control of, because it is directly affecting and directly related to whether or not we will have an Africa tomorrow. You know, we are responsible for making sure we have an Africa for our children and our children's children tomorrow. The same way our forefathers and previous freedom fighters and human rights defenders fought for us to be able to sit in these spaces today and occupy these spaces today. It's important for us to now carry the mantle and ensure that we are there to protect this great continent of ours, because Africa is amazing. And I think ultimately, even going back to why I got into human rights defending, I would say it's because I love being an African and I love living in Africa. I love being a Zambian. And I have traveled to different parts of the world. And ultimately, there's no place like home. So for me, I got into a space where I had to sit down and ask myself, if this country, my country, went up in flames, where would I go? And just the thought of me having to live somewhere else by force prompted me to at least fight my very best fight to ensure that I still have a home for myself. You know, it's something that was personal, I think, for every Zambian. So yeah, that's one thing I will say. And really looking back at it all, if there's no regrets, and I'm truly proud of the great work that has been done in this country by so many young Zambians, so many older Zambians that just came together, whether with their different resources, to just make sure we speak up and maintain the democracy in this country. Yeah. Thank you.